Imagine this. It's a chilly Friday evening in downtown Chicago, and Eric just walked through the door of his cramped studio apartment after another soul-crushing week at his corporate job. As he tosses his keys on the kitchen counter and loosens his tie, a familiar weight settles in his chest. He stares out his window at the city lights below, and that nagging voice in his head gets louder. This can't be all there is to life. Sound familiar? Maybe you're not Eric, and maybe you're not in Chicago, but I bet you've felt that exact same feeling. That restless, suffocating sense that you're living someone else's life, going through the motions day after day, wondering when you became a passenger in your own story. Eric stood there wrestling with two voices in his head. The first one, loud and familiar, whispered all the reasons why he should just accept his fate. You're too old to change. You don't have the skills. What if you fail? But there was another voice, quieter but more persistent, that kept saying, the only way out of this rut is to forge a new path for yourself. Real change begins with you. That night, as Eric scrolled through his phone trying to distract himself from these uncomfortable thoughts, he remembered something his friend Liam had told him months earlier. Liam used to be just as stuck as Eric, maybe even worse. He was drowning in debt, his relationship was falling apart, and he could barely get out of bed most mornings. But something had changed. Liam seemed different now, more confident, more at peace with himself. When Eric asked him about it, Liam mentioned this philosophy called Stoicism that had completely transformed how he saw life. At the time, Eric had brushed it off. Philosophy seemed like something for college professors and people with too much time on their hands. But lying there in his bed that Friday night, staring at the ceiling, Eric found himself genuinely curious. If Liam could turn his life around with these ancient ideas, why couldn't he? Here's the thing about feeling stuck. It's not actually about your circumstances. I know that might sound crazy, especially if you're dealing with real problems like a job you hate, relationships that drain you, or financial stress that keeps you up at night. But the ancient Stoics discovered something profound over 2,000 years ago that modern psychology is just catching up to. The power to change your life doesn't come from changing your situation first. It comes from changing how you think about your situation. If you've ever felt like Eric, trapped in a cycle of routine and wondering if there's more to life, consider this your invitation to explore something that has helped millions of people, from Roman emperors to modern entrepreneurs, completely reinvent themselves. We're not talking about positive thinking or wishful dreaming. We're talking about practical, time-tested strategies that work in the real world. In the next few minutes, I'm going to walk you through 10 powerful principles from Stoic philosophy that can help you break free from whatever's holding you back and start building the life you actually want to live. These aren't just abstract concepts. They're tools you can start using today to begin your own transformation. The journey Eric started that Friday night led him to discover something remarkable. He already had everything he needed to change his life. He just needed to learn how to use it. And by the end of this video, you'll have that same knowledge. So if you're ready to stop being a passenger in your own life and start taking control of your destiny, stay with me. Your transformation starts now, and it begins with understanding why the smallest changes often create the biggest results. 1. Why small changes beat big dreams every time. Let me tell you about Sarah, a marketing manager in downtown Los Angeles who was absolutely exhausted by her own ambitions. Every January, she'd write out these massive goals. Lose 50 pounds, learn Spanish fluently, start a side business, read 100 books, completely overhaul her social life. By February, she'd be drowning in her own expectations, and by March, she'd given up entirely, feeling like a complete failure. Sound familiar? We live in a culture that worships the big transformation, the dramatic before and after story, the overnight success. Social media feeds us a constant stream of people who seem to have completely reinvented themselves in impossibly short amounts of time. But here's what nobody tells you. Most of those stories are either fake or unsustainable. The ancient Stoics understood something about human nature that we've somehow forgotten in our instant gratification world. Zeno of Citium, the founder of Stoicism, put it perfectly: well-being is realized by small steps, but it is no small thing. Think about that for a moment. The man who created an entire philosophy that would influence emperors and shape Western thought for over 2 millennia was telling us that the secret to transformation isn't in the grand gesture. It's in the tiny, consistent action. Here's why this matters for your life right now. When you're standing in front of your bathroom mirror at 6 a.m., heart pounding because you're finally ready to change everything about yourself, your brain is actually working against you. It sees massive change as a threat to your survival. That's why you can feel incredibly motivated to transform your entire life on Sunday night, but by Wednesday morning, you're back to your old patterns. But what if I told you that the most successful people in history, the ones who created lasting change, didn't rely on motivation at all? They relied on something much more powerful: the compound effect of small, deliberate actions. Think about building a cathedral. Nobody wakes up one morning and says, "I'm going to construct Notre Dame today." Instead, it starts with a single stone carefully placed, then another stone and another. Each placement seems insignificant by itself, but over time, these individual actions create something magnificent that will stand for centuries. Your life works the same way. Every small choice you make is either building the person you want to become or reinforcing the person you're trying to leave behind. The problem is, we've been conditioned to ignore the small stuff because it doesn't feel important enough. Let me give you a practical example. Sarah wanted to become more confident, so she thought she needed to completely transform her personality overnight. She signed up for public speaking classes, networking events, and leadership seminars all at once. Within 2 weeks, she was overwhelmed and quit everything. But what if Sarah had applied Stoic wisdom instead? What if she had started with one tiny act of confidence each day? Maybe it's making eye contact with the barista at Starbucks and saying, "Thank you," with genuine warmth. Maybe it's speaking up once in a team meeting instead of staying silent. Maybe it's wearing that dress she loves but never wears because she's worried about what people will think. These actions seem almost ridiculously small, but here's what happens. Each time Sarah chooses the confident action over the safe action, she's literally rewiring her brain. She's proving to herself that she can be the person she wants to be. And more importantly, she's building what James Clear calls atomic habits. Tiny changes that compound over time into remarkable results. The Stoics had a beautiful way of thinking about this. They didn't focus on outcomes they couldn't control, like whether people would like them or whether they'd succeed at everything they tried. Instead, they focused on the one thing they could always control: their next choice. Epictetus, who went from being a slave to becoming one of the most respected philosophers in Rome, understood this better than anyone. He taught that we don't control what happens to us, but we always control how we respond. And the way we respond in small moments shapes who we become in big moments. So here's your challenge, and it's probably going to feel almost insultingly simple. Pick one tiny thing you can do today that moves you toward the person you want to be. Not 10 things. Not a complete life overhaul. One thing. Want to be more assertive? Practice saying no to one small request today instead of automatically saying yes to avoid conflict. Want to be healthier? Drink one extra glass of water. Want to be more knowledgeable? Read one page of a book that challenges you. Want to be more organized? Make your bed. I know what you're thinking. This is too small to matter. But that's exactly why it works. It's so small that your brain doesn't perceive it as a threat. It's so manageable that you can't make excuses. And it's so achievable that you'll actually do it, which builds the most important muscle of all. The muscle of following through on your commitments to yourself. The ancient Stoics weren't just philosophers sitting around thinking deep thoughts. They were practical people dealing with real-world challenges. Wars, political upheaval, personal tragedies, difficult relationships. They developed these principles because they worked in the messiness of actual life. Marcus Aurelius was running the Roman Empire while writing his personal journal that we now call Meditations. He wasn't writing about grand theories. He was reminding himself of small, daily practices that kept him grounded and focused on what really mattered. Here's what happens when you embrace the power of small changes. You start to trust yourself again. Every time you follow through on a tiny commitment, you're building evidence that you're the kind of person who does what they say they'll do. And that self-trust becomes the foundation for bigger changes down the road. Remember, the goal isn't to stay small forever. The goal is to build momentum. A river starts as a tiny stream, but it can eventually carve through mountains. Your small daily choices are that stream, and the person you're becoming is the canyon you're creating. As we move forward in this journey of transformation, keep this Stoic wisdom close to your heart. Dream big, but start small. Because the truth is, every expert was once a beginner, every master was once a disaster, and every success story started with someone who decided that today was the day to take one small step toward who they wanted to become. The next principle we'll explore builds on this foundation of small changes, because once you understand the power of starting small, you're ready to tackle one of the biggest obstacles to personal transformation. The anxiety that keeps you trapped in patterns that no longer serve you. 2. The real reason your anxiety never goes away. It was 2 a.m. on a Tuesday, and Marcus, a software engineer in Seattle, was wide awake staring at his phone, scrolling through work emails and mentally rehearsing tomorrow's presentation for the 100th time. His heart was racing, his palms were sweaty, and that familiar knot in his stomach was getting tighter by the minute. Sound familiar? Marcus had tried everything to manage his anxiety. Meditation apps, therapy, breathing exercises, even cutting out caffeine. But nothing seemed to work long-term. The anxiety always came back, sometimes worse than before. What Marcus didn't realize was that he was fighting the wrong battle entirely. Here's the truth that most people miss about anxiety. It's not actually caused by your circumstances. I know that sounds impossible, especially when you're dealing with real stress like a demanding boss, financial pressure, or relationship problems. But the ancient Stoics discovered something revolutionary that modern neuroscience is now proving. Anxiety lives in your perception, not in your situation. Marcus Aurelius, who literally had the weight of the Roman Empire on his shoulders, wrote something in his personal journal that changed everything for people like Marcus in Seattle. "Today I escaped anxiety. Or no, I discarded it, because it was within me, in my own perceptions, not outside." Think about that for a moment. The most powerful man in the ancient world, dealing with wars, plagues, and political chaos, realized that his anxiety wasn't coming from external events. It was coming from how he was thinking about those events. This isn't some feel-good philosophy or positive thinking nonsense. This is practical wisdom that can change your life today. Let me show you how this works in the real world. Marcus in Seattle was anxious about his presentation, right? But here's the thing. The presentation itself wasn't causing his anxiety. Thousands of people give presentations every day without losing sleep. The anxiety was coming from the story Marcus was telling himself about the presentation. His internal narrative went something like this: "If I mess up this presentation, my boss will think I'm incompetent. If my boss thinks I'm incompetent, I might get fired. If I get fired, I won't be able to pay my rent. I'll have to move back in with my parents. Everyone will know I'm a failure." See what happened there? Marcus took a simple 20-minute presentation and turned it into a catastrophic threat to his entire identity and survival. No wonder he couldn't sleep. But what if Marcus learned to see the situation through stoic eyes? What if instead of seeing the presentation as a threat, he saw it as an opportunity to practice courage? What if instead of focusing on all the things that could go wrong, he focused on the one thing he could control: his preparation and his response? The Stoics taught that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. Most of our anxiety comes from stories we tell ourselves about what might happen, not what's actually happening right now. We're essentially torturing ourselves with fictional scenarios. Here's how to apply this Stoic wisdom to your own anxiety. The next time you feel that familiar tightness in your chest or racing thoughts, pause and ask yourself, what story am I telling myself right now? Then ask, is this story actually true? Or is it just one possible interpretation of the situation? Let's say you sent a text to a friend 3 hours ago and they haven't responded. Your anxious mind might create this story. They're ignoring me. They must be mad about something I said. Maybe they don't want to be friends anymore. But the Stoic approach would be to recognize that there are dozens of possible explanations, most of them having nothing to do with you. The key insight here is that you always have a choice in how you interpret events. You can't control whether your friend responds to your text, but you can control whether you turn their silence into evidence that you're unlikable. This doesn't mean pretending everything is fine when it's not. It means getting clear about what's actually happening versus what you're imagining might happen. It means distinguishing between problems you can solve and problems you're creating in your own mind. Marcus Aurelius faced real challenges: barbarian invasions, political conspiracies, natural disasters. But he learned to separate the actual challenge from his emotional reaction to the challenge. He dealt with the facts and refused to multiply his suffering by adding layers of worry, catastrophizing, and self-doubt. Here's a practical exercise you can try today. When anxiety hits, write down exactly what you're worried about. Then divide your list into 2 columns: things I can control and things I can't control. Focus all your energy on the first column and practice letting go of the second. For Marcus in Seattle, the can control list might include preparing thoroughly for his presentation, getting enough sleep the night before, practicing his delivery, and choosing to focus on being helpful rather than impressive. The can't control list includes how his boss will react, whether technical difficulties will occur, what his colleagues will think, and whether this presentation will determine his entire career trajectory. The beautiful thing about this approach is that it actually reduces anxiety while making you more effective. When you stop wasting mental energy on things you can't control, you have more resources available for the things you can influence. But here's the deeper truth the Stoics understood. Most of our anxiety comes from trying to control outcomes instead of controlling our responses. We exhaust ourselves trying to manage other people's opinions, predict the future, and guarantee specific results. But the only thing we can ever truly control is our next choice. This shift in perspective is like learning to navigate by the stars instead of trying to control the weather. You can't make the storm stop, but you can learn to sail through it with skill and grace. The ancient Stoics weren't emotionless robots. They felt fear, disappointment, and uncertainty just like we do. But they learned to see these feelings as information rather than instructions. They felt the anxiety, acknowledged it, and then chose their response based on wisdom rather than worry. As you practice this approach, you'll start to notice something remarkable. The situations that used to send you into spirals of anxiety begin to feel more manageable. Not because the situations changed, but because you changed how you relate to them. This foundation of mental clarity and emotional resilience sets you up perfectly for our next principle. Because once you stop letting anxiety dictate your choices, you're ready to create the structured foundation that will support your transformation. Building a routine that actually sticks. 3. How to build a morning routine that actually sticks. Jessica, a nurse in Miami, used to hit the snooze button 4 times every morning, then rush through her apartment like a tornado, grabbing whatever clothes were clean, downing instant coffee, and arriving at work already feeling defeated. She tried creating morning routines before, elaborate 90-minute sequences involving meditation, journaling, exercise, and healthy breakfast prep. They lasted about 3 days. The problem wasn't Jessica's willpower. The problem was that she was trying to build a routine instead of designing a life. There's a huge difference, and the ancient Stoics understood this better than anyone. Seneca, one of Rome's most successful philosophers and advisors, wrote, "Life without a design is erratic." He wasn't talking about rigid scheduling or obsessive planning. He was talking about intentionally architecting your days around what actually matters to you, not just what feels urgent. Think of your morning routine as a compass, not a cage. A compass doesn't restrict where you can go. It helps ensure you're moving in the right direction. Most people fail at morning routines because they're trying to force themselves into someone else's blueprint instead of creating a system that works with their natural rhythms and actual life circumstances. Here's how to build a routine that sticks, using Stoic principles that have worked for over 2,000 years. First, identify your peak hours. Jessica discovered that she was naturally most creative and focused between 6 a.m. and 8 a.m., but she was wasting this golden time hitting snooze and scrambling. The Stoics taught that wisdom means aligning your actions with your nature, not fighting against it. Ask yourself, when do you feel most alive and capable? When is your mind clearest? These aren't luxury hours to be filled with busy work. They're your most valuable real estate. Protect them fiercely and dedicate them to activities that feed your soul, challenge your mind, or build your strength. Second, start ridiculously small. Jessica's mistake was trying to transform her entire morning at once. Instead, she started with just 5 minutes of reading something inspiring while drinking her coffee. That's it. No meditation, no workout, no elaborate breakfast ritual. Just 5 minutes of feeding her mind instead of immediately checking her phone. The Stoics understood that consistency beats intensity every time. It's better to do something small every day than something impressive once a week. After 2 weeks of her 5-minute reading habit, Jessica naturally started waking up 10 minutes earlier because she enjoyed this peaceful start to her day. Third, align your routine with your aspirations. If you want to become more thoughtful, build in reflection time. If you want to become stronger, include movement. If you want to become more knowledgeable, create space for learning. Your morning routine should be a daily vote for the person you're becoming. Jessica realized she wanted to feel more grounded and less reactive at work. So she gradually added 3 minutes of deep breathing after her reading time. Not because some guru told her to, but because it directly supported who she wanted to be, someone who could stay calm under pressure. Fourth, prepare the night before. The Stoics were big on removing obstacles to good choices. Jessica started laying out her clothes, preparing her coffee maker, and putting her book on the kitchen counter before bed. This eliminated decision fatigue and made her morning routine feel effortless rather than effortful. Here's the key insight most people miss. Your routine should energize you, not drain you. If your morning routine feels like a chore you have to force yourself through, you're doing it wrong. A good routine should feel like coming home to yourself. The ancient Stoics weren't trying to optimize their productivity. They were trying to live according to their values. Marcus Aurelius started each day by reminding himself of his principles and preparing mentally for whatever challenges might arise. This wasn't about time management. It was about soul management. Start with this simple framework. Choose one small activity that connects you to who you want to become. Do it at the same time every day for 2 weeks. Then, if it feels natural and beneficial, add one more small element. Build slowly, consistently, and always in service of your deeper values. Remember, the goal isn't to have the perfect morning routine. The goal is to start each day intentionally, grounded in what matters most to you. As you master this foundation of deliberate daily design, you'll be ready for our next principle. Learning to give yourself the decisive command that changes everything. For the one command that changes everything. David, a 34-year-old accountant in Phoenix, had been complaining about his job for 3 years. Every happy hour, every family dinner, every casual conversation somehow turned into David venting about his micromanaging boss, his boring projects, and his complete lack of career growth. His friends started avoiding his calls. His girlfriend was tired of hearing the same complaints with no action. But David felt stuck, trapped by his mortgage, his routine, and his fear of the unknown. Then one Tuesday morning, something shifted. David looked at himself in the bathroom mirror and said out loud, "Stop. Just stop." Not stop complaining, though that was part of it. Stop accepting a life that was slowly killing his spirit. Stop being the victim of his own choices. Stop waiting for someone else to change his circumstances. That moment of decisive self-command changed everything, and it's based on one of the most powerful principles in Stoic philosophy. The Stoics understood that transformation isn't about gradually shifting your mindset or slowly building better habits. Sometimes, real change requires what they called a decisive break. A moment when you give yourself a direct order to stop being who you've been and start being who you're meant to become. Consider Dwight D. Eisenhower, who was smoking 4 packs of cigarettes a day, a habit that was literally killing him. He didn't gradually reduce his smoking or try nicotine patches or make elaborate plans to quit someday. He simply gave himself an order: stop, today, right now. And he never smoked again. This wasn't just about quitting cigarettes. It was about reclaiming his power to command his own life. Epictetus, who went from being a slave to becoming one of the most respected philosophers in history, taught this principle clearly. No man is free who is not master of himself. Freedom isn't about your external circumstances. It's about your ability to give yourself orders and follow them. Here's what most people don't understand about change. You're already giving yourself commands all day long. The problem is, they're usually the wrong commands. You tell yourself to check your phone instead of having a difficult conversation. You tell yourself to stay in bed instead of going to the gym. You tell yourself to accept mediocrity instead of pursuing what you really want. The power to transform your life lies in recognizing that you can change these internal commands at any moment. David's breakthrough came when he realized he had been giving himself the same limiting command for 3 years. Stay safe. Don't rock the boat. Accept what you have. But that Tuesday morning, he gave himself a different command. Stop settling for a life that doesn't inspire you. Within 6 months, David had applied for a new position at a different company, started taking evening classes to develop new skills, and began having honest conversations with his girlfriend about their future together. Not because his circumstances magically improved, but because he changed the orders he was giving himself. This isn't about positive thinking or wishful hoping. This is about recognizing that you have the power to interrupt your own patterns and choose a different direction. The Stoics called this the discipline of desire, the ability to want what serves your highest good rather than what feels comfortable in the moment. Here's how to apply this principle in your own life. First, identify the one thing that's keeping you anchored to a version of yourself you've outgrown. Maybe it's a relationship that drains your energy. Maybe it's a habit that's slowly undermining your health. Maybe it's a job that pays the bills but crushes your soul. Maybe it's a limiting belief about what you're capable of achieving. Be honest with yourself. What is the one thing you know needs to change but you've been avoiding because it feels too difficult or scary? Second, give yourself a clear, direct command. Not, I should probably think about maybe changing this someday. Not, I'll try to do better. A command, I will no longer accept this in my life. Say it out loud. Write it down. Make it real. Third, take one immediate action that proves you mean it. David didn't just decide to stop settling. He updated his resume that same day. The action doesn't have to be huge, but it has to be concrete and immediate. Your brain needs evidence that this command is different from all the other times you've thought about changing. The beautiful thing about this approach is that it bypasses all the mental negotiations and excuses that usually sabotage change. You're not trying to convince yourself or build motivation. You're simply exercising your power as the commander of your own life. Marcus Aurelius practiced this daily. Each morning, he would give himself clear commands about how to show up in the world. Today, I will be patient with difficult people. Today, I will focus on what I can control. Today, I will act according to my values, not my emotions. Remember, you are not a victim of your circumstances, your past, or your habits. You are the author of your own story, and authors have the power to change the plot at any moment. The question isn't whether you have this power, you do. The question is whether you'll use it. As you practice giving yourself clear, decisive commands, you'll discover something remarkable. You have far more control over your life than you ever imagined. And this sense of personal agency becomes the foundation for our next principle. Learning to free up your most precious resources so you can invest them in what truly matters. 5. Stop wasting time on these 3 things. Rachel, a marketing coordinator in Denver, couldn't figure out why she felt so busy but never seemed to accomplish anything meaningful. She'd work 10-hour days, check her phone 200 times, attend countless meetings, and still go to bed feeling like she hadn't moved the needle on what actually mattered to her. Sound familiar? The problem wasn't that Rachel needed better time management apps or productivity hacks. The problem was that she was unconsciously investing her most precious resources, time and attention, in activities that were slowly draining her life force instead of building the person she wanted to become. Epictetus, who understood human psychology better than most modern experts, put it perfectly: if you wish to improve, be willing to appear clueless or stupid in exchange for growth. What he meant was this: most of us are so attached to looking busy and staying comfortable that we never make space for the activities that would actually transform our lives. Here are the 3 biggest time and energy drains that keep people stuck, and how to break free from each one. First, mindless consumption. Rachel spent 2 hours every morning scrolling through social media, reading news articles that made her anxious, and watching videos that entertained her but taught her nothing. She told herself she was staying informed and relaxing, but really she was feeding her mind junk food. The Stoics understood that what you consume mentally shapes who you become just as much as what you consume physically. Marcus Aurelius didn't start his day reading gossip about other Roman citizens. He started by reflecting on wisdom that would help him become a better leader and person. Here's the shift. Instead of consuming content that makes you feel worse about yourself or the world, consume content that challenges you to grow. Replace 1 hour of social media scrolling with reading something that expands your thinking. Replace mindless YouTube videos with podcasts that teach you skills you actually want to develop. Second, energy-draining conversations. Rachel realized she was spending hours every week in conversations that went nowhere, complaining about work with colleagues, gossiping about mutual friends, rehashing the same problems without looking for solutions. These conversations felt social and harmless, but they were actually toxic to her mental state. The Stoics were very intentional about their social interactions. Seneca wrote extensively about choosing companions who would make a better man of you. This doesn't mean being antisocial or cutting off friends who are going through tough times. It means being conscious about whether your conversations are lifting you up or pulling you down. Make this shift. When someone starts a conversation that's purely negative, complaining without seeking solutions, gossiping without purpose, or dwelling on problems they're not willing to address, gently redirect the conversation or politely excuse yourself. Protect your mental energy like the precious resource it is. Third, fake productivity. This was Rachel's biggest trap. She spent enormous amounts of time on activities that felt productive but didn't actually move her toward her goals. Organizing her email inbox for the 3rd time that week. Attending meetings where nothing was decided. Researching solutions to problems she wasn't ready to solve yet. The Stoics had a simple test for whether an activity was worth their time. Does this help me become the person I want to be? Or is it just keeping me busy? Marcus Aurelius constantly asked himself, is this necessary? If the answer was no, he eliminated it. Here's how to apply this. At the end of each day, write down how you spent your time. Then honestly assess which activities moved you closer to your goals and which ones just filled time. Start eliminating or minimizing the time fillers. The goal isn't to become a productivity robot who never relaxes or has fun. The goal is to become conscious about where your attention goes and make sure you're investing it intentionally rather than letting it leak away on activities that don't serve you. Rachel started tracking her time for 1 week and was shocked to discover she was spending 15 hours per week on these 3 drains. When she redirected even half of that time toward learning new skills, having meaningful conversations, and working on projects that excited her, her entire life began to shift. Remember, time is the one resource you can never get back. The Stoics understood that how you spend your days is how you spend your life. Every hour you invest in growth compounds over time, just like every hour you waste on distractions compounds into regret. As you begin to free up these precious resources, you'll have the mental space and energy needed for our next principle: embracing challenges that will forge you into someone stronger. 6. Why you need to do something that scares you. Tom, a graphic designer in Boston, had been talking about starting his own freelance business for 2 years. He had the skills, the potential clients, and even a business plan sitting in a folder on his desktop. But every time he thought about actually taking the leap, his stomach would twist into knots. What if he failed? What if he couldn't find clients? What if he ended up broke and had to crawl back to his corporate job? So Tom stayed comfortable, safe, and increasingly miserable in a job that was slowly crushing his creative spirit. Then one day, Tom read about Seneca's annual tradition. Every winter, the wealthy Roman philosopher would deliberately plunge into the icy waters of the Tiber River. Not because he enjoyed being cold, but because he understood something profound about human nature. We become strong by doing things that require strength. Seneca wasn't just taking a cold swim. He was taking control of his own life by proving to himself that he could do difficult things. He was building what the Stoics called inner citadel, an unshakable core of self-confidence that comes from knowing you can handle whatever life throws at you. Here's what most people don't understand about fear. It's not a warning sign that you're in danger. It's usually a sign that you're about to grow. The things that scare you most are often the exact things you need to do to become who you're meant to be. Think about it this way. If you want to build physical muscle, you have to lift weights that are heavy enough to challenge your current strength. If you want to build mental and emotional muscle, you have to take on challenges that are difficult enough to stretch your current capabilities. Tom realized that his fear of starting his own business wasn't protecting him from failure. It was guaranteeing that he'd never discover what he was truly capable of achieving. The safe path felt comfortable, but it was actually the riskiest choice of all because it meant never finding out who he could become. The Stoics understood that comfort is the enemy of growth. When you're comfortable, you're not developing new skills, building resilience, or discovering hidden strengths. You're just maintaining the status quo, which means you're actually moving backward while everyone else moves forward. But here's the key insight. You don't have to jump off a cliff to apply this principle. You just need to identify one thing that scares you but would genuinely improve your life if you did it, then commit to doing it. For Tom, that meant sending one cold email to a potential client. Just one. Not launching his entire business overnight, but taking one small action that required courage. That first email led to a conversation, which led to a small project, which led to the confidence to take on bigger challenges. Maybe for you, it's having an honest conversation with someone you've been avoiding. Maybe it's signing up for that public speaking class. Maybe it's applying for a job that feels slightly out of your league. Maybe it's starting that creative project you've been putting off because you're worried it won't be perfect. The specific challenge doesn't matter as much as the act of choosing growth over comfort. Every time you do something that scares you a little bit, you're proving to yourself that you're capable of more than you thought. Here's how to apply this principle safely and effectively. First, choose a challenge that's scary but not dangerous. We're talking about emotional discomfort, not physical risk. Second, start smaller than you think you need to. The goal is to build confidence through success, not to overwhelm yourself. Third, focus on the process, not the outcome. You can't control whether that person says yes to your request, but you can control whether you make the request. The beautiful thing about embracing difficult challenges is that it changes how you see yourself. Instead of being someone who avoids discomfort, you become someone who moves toward growth. Instead of being limited by your fears, you become curious about what lies beyond them. Marcus Aurelius faced barbarian invasions, political conspiracies, and personal tragedies, but he approached each challenge as an opportunity to practice virtue and build character. He didn't seek out difficulty for its own sake, but he didn't run from it either. As you begin to embrace challenges that stretch your comfort zone, you'll develop the inner strength needed for our next principle. Surrounding yourself with people who inspire you to become better rather than settling for who you've always been. 7. The friends test that will change your life. Lisa, a nurse in Atlanta, couldn't understand why she felt so drained after spending time with her closest friends. They'd meet for dinner every Friday, and the conversation always followed the same pattern. Complaining about work, gossiping about people they knew, and rehashing the same problems they'd been discussing for months without ever looking for solutions. Lisa would drive home feeling emotionally exhausted and slightly depressed, but she told herself this was just what friendship looked like. After all, these were good people who cared about her. But deep down, she knew something was missing. Then Lisa met Jennifer at a professional development workshop. Jennifer was different. She asked thoughtful questions, shared interesting books she was reading, and talked about challenges she was working to overcome rather than just problems she was stuck in. After spending an afternoon with Jennifer, Lisa felt energized and inspired. That's when Lisa discovered one of the most powerful principles in Stoic philosophy. You become like the people you spend time with, whether you realize it or not. Seneca, who understood human psychology deeply, wrote to his friend Lucilius, "Associate with those who will make a better man of you." This wasn't about being snobby or cutting off friends who were struggling. It was about recognizing that every conversation either lifts you up or pulls you down, and the cumulative effect shapes who you become. Think about it like this. If you wanted to become physically fit, would you spend all your time with people who never exercised and constantly talked about how impossible it is to get in shape? Of course not. You'd seek out people who were already living the lifestyle you wanted to adopt. The same principle applies to every area of your life. If you want to become more positive, spend time with optimistic people. If you want to build a business, connect with entrepreneurs. If you want to grow intellectually, engage with people who challenge your thinking. Here's the test that changed Lisa's life. After every social interaction, Ask yourself, do I feel more inspired or more drained? Do I feel more capable or more limited? Do I feel more hopeful about my future or more resigned to my current situation? This doesn't mean you should only spend time with people who are successful or always positive. Some of the most valuable relationships are with people who are going through difficult times but are actively working to improve their situation. The key is whether the person is growing or just complaining, learning or just venting, taking responsibility or just blaming. Lisa realized that her Friday dinner group had become an echo chamber of negativity. They reinforced each other's limiting beliefs and gave each other permission to stay stuck. Meanwhile, her conversations with Jennifer opened up new possibilities and challenged her to think bigger about what her life could become. This led Lisa to make some difficult but necessary changes. She didn't cut off her old friends, but she started setting boundaries around negative conversations. When someone wanted to complain about the same problem for the 100th time, Lisa would say, "That sounds really frustrating. What are you thinking of doing about it?" If they weren't interested in solutions, she gently changed the subject or excused herself. At the same time, Lisa actively sought out relationships with people who inspired her. She joined a book club focused on personal development, started attending networking events in her field, and began having regular coffee meetings with colleagues who shared her interest in professional growth. The transformation was remarkable. Within 6 months, Lisa had been promoted at work, started a side business helping other nurses advance their careers, and felt more optimistic about her future than she had in years. Not because she changed her circumstances, but because she changed her social environment. The Stoics understood that we're social creatures who are constantly influenced by the people around us. Marcus Aurelius surrounded himself with advisors who would challenge his thinking and hold him accountable to his values. He knew that even an emperor needed people who would help him become better. Here's your action step. Take inventory of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Are they encouraging your growth or enabling your limitations? Are your conversations focused on possibilities or problems? Are you inspired by their example or discouraged by their outlook? You don't have to make dramatic changes overnight, but start being more intentional about who gets access to your time and energy. Seek out at least one relationship with someone who embodies qualities you want to develop in yourself. As you begin to curate a circle of people who inspire your growth, you'll find yourself naturally developing the courage needed for our next principle, embracing change as the pathway to becoming who you're meant to be. 8. What Marcus Aurelius knew about fear. Kevin, a 29-year-old teacher in Portland, had been living in the same studio apartment for 5 years, not because he loved it, but because the thought of moving terrified him. What if he couldn't find anything better? What if the new neighborhood wasn't safe? What if he made the wrong choice and regretted it? So Kevin stayed put, watching his rent increase every year while his quality of life slowly declined. Kevin's problem wasn't unique. Most of us are living smaller lives than we need to because we've mistaken fear of change for wisdom. We tell ourselves we're being practical or responsible, but really we're just scared of the unknown. Marcus Aurelius, who had to make decisions that affected millions of people and could literally change the course of history, understood something about fear that most of us never learn. The thing we're most afraid of change is actually the most natural and inevitable part of life. In his personal journal, he wrote, "The universe is change. Our life is what our thoughts make it." This wasn't just philosophical poetry. This was practical wisdom from someone who had to navigate constant political upheaval, military conflicts, and personal tragedies while running the Roman Empire. Here's what Marcus Aurelius knew that Kevin didn't. Change is happening whether you participate in it or not. The question isn't whether your life will change, it will. The question is whether you'll be an active participant in shaping that change or a passive victim of it. Think about it this way: you're like a river. You can flow smoothly around obstacles, carving your own path toward your destination, or you can resist the current and get stuck against rocks, creating turbulence and stagnation. Either way, the water keeps moving. The choice is whether you move with purpose or just get pushed around by circumstances. Kevin's fear of change was actually creating the very instability he was trying to avoid. By refusing to make proactive decisions about his living situation, he was leaving himself vulnerable to reactive decisions. Eventually, his landlord sold the building and Kevin had to move anyway. But now he had 30 days instead of months to find a new place, and he had to take whatever he could find instead of choosing what he actually wanted. The Stoics understood that most of our suffering comes from resisting reality instead of adapting to it. When you fight against change, you're essentially fighting against the fundamental nature of existence. It's like trying to stop the ocean with your bare hands. Exhausting and ultimately futile. But here's the beautiful truth Marcus Aurelius discovered. When you stop fearing change and start embracing it as a natural part of growth, everything becomes easier. Instead of seeing change as a threat to your security, you start seeing it as an opportunity to create something better. This doesn't mean being reckless or making changes just for the sake of change. It means developing what the Stoics called preferred indifference to outcomes you can't control while taking thoughtful action on things you can influence. For Kevin, this meant shifting his focus from, "What if this move doesn't work out?" to "What can I learn from this experience, regardless of how it turns out?" Instead of trying to guarantee a perfect outcome, he started focusing on making the best decision with the information he had available. The shift in mindset was transformative. Kevin started researching neighborhoods with curiosity instead of anxiety. He began seeing apartment hunting as an adventure rather than a threat. When he finally moved to a new place, he discovered not only that he loved his new neighborhood, but that the process of navigating change had given him confidence to make other improvements in his life. Here's how to apply Marcus Aurelius's wisdom to your own relationship with change. First, recognize that the stability you're trying to preserve by avoiding change is largely an illusion. Everything in your life is already changing: your body, your relationships, your circumstances, your opportunities. The only choice is whether you guide that change intentionally. Second, practice what the Stoics called negative visualization. Instead of imagining all the ways change could go wrong, spend time thinking about how staying the same could limit your growth and opportunities. What possibilities are you missing by clinging to the familiar? Third, start small. You don't have to make dramatic life changes overnight. Begin by making tiny adjustments to your routine, trying new experiences, or exploring options you've been curious about. Each small change builds your confidence and adaptability. As you develop comfort with change and uncertainty, you'll discover the freedom that comes with our next principle: learning to focus only on what truly matters by saying no to everything else. 9. The art of saying no without feeling guilty. Amanda, a project manager in Chicago, was drowning in her own helpfulness. She'd volunteered to organize the office holiday party, agreed to help her neighbor move, committed to 3 different weekend social events and somehow found herself on 2 nonprofit committees she didn't even care about. Meanwhile, the business idea she'd been excited about for months sat untouched in a notebook on her nightstand. Amanda wasn't lazy or unfocused. She was suffering from what psychologists call yes addiction. The inability to decline requests because she was terrified of disappointing people or appearing selfish. But her constant yes saying was actually preventing her from saying yes to the things that truly mattered. Marcus Aurelius, who literally had an entire empire making demands on his time, mastered something that Amanda hadn't learned yet: the power of strategic no. In his personal writings, he constantly reminded himself to ask one simple question: is this necessary? Not, is this a good opportunity? Not, will people be upset if I don't do this? Simply, is this necessary for me to become the person I want to be and live the life I want to live? This wasn't about being selfish or uncaring. Marcus Aurelius was known for his generosity and sense of duty, but he understood that you can't serve others effectively if you're scattered, overwhelmed, and resentful. True service comes from a place of strength and intentionality, not from compulsive people-pleasing. Here's what Amanda discovered when she started applying the Stoic principle. Most of the things she was saying yes to weren't actually helping anyone. Her half-hearted participation in activities she didn't care about wasn't adding value to those organizations. Her resentful help wasn't making her relationship stronger, and her scattered attention wasn't allowing her to excel at anything. The Stoics taught that clarity comes from subtraction, not addition. When you remove the inessential, what remains becomes more powerful and meaningful. It's like clearing clutter from your home. Suddenly you can see and appreciate what you actually value. But how do you say no without feeling guilty or damaging relationships? Here's the framework that changed Amanda's life. First, get clear on your priorities. You can't make good decisions about what to decline if you're not clear about what you want to say yes to. Amanda realized that her top priorities were advancing her career, building her side business, and maintaining close relationships with her family and a few dear friends. Everything else was optional. Second, practice the kind but firm no. Instead of making excuses or over-explaining, Amanda learned to say things like, "That sounds like a great project, but I can't commit to it right now." Or, "I'm honored you thought of me, but I need to focus my energy elsewhere." Notice there's no apology for having boundaries and no elaborate justification. Third, offer alternatives when appropriate. If Amanda genuinely cared about a cause but couldn't volunteer her time, she might make a small financial donation instead. If she couldn't help with a big project, she might suggest someone else who would be perfect for it. This showed that she cared without sacrificing her own priorities. The transformation was remarkable. Within 3 months, Amanda had launched her consulting business, deepened her relationships with the people who mattered most to her, and felt more energized and focused than she had in years. Not because she became selfish, but because she became intentional. The guilt that Amanda initially felt when saying no gradually disappeared as she saw the positive results. Her friends respected her boundaries and actually seemed to value her time more when they knew it wasn't unlimited. Her work performance improved because she could focus fully on her responsibilities instead of being distracted by outside commitments. Here's the deeper truth the Stoics understood. When you say yes to everything, you're actually saying no to the things that matter most. Every commitment you make is a choice about how to spend your finite time and energy. By default, you're already saying no to thousands of possibilities every day. The question is whether you're making those choices consciously or just letting them happen to you. Marcus Aurelius didn't try to please everyone or do everything. He focused on being an excellent emperor, philosopher, and father. By saying no to the inessential, he was able to say yes fully to what truly mattered. As you master the art of strategic no-saying, you create space for what matters most. And when you inevitably stumble or fall short of your own standards, you'll need our final principle, the grace to return to your path with wisdom and self-compassion. 10. How to bounce back when you fall off track. Mike, a sales manager in Dallas, had been crushing his new morning routine for 6 weeks straight. He was waking up at 5:30 a.m., meditating for 10 minutes, reading for 20 minutes, and hitting the gym before work. He felt amazing, more focused and energetic than he had in years. Then his company launched a major project that required 12-hour days. His kid got sick, and his car broke down all in the same week. By Friday, Mike was sleeping until 7 a.m., skipping the gym, and starting his day by immediately checking emails in bed. He felt like a complete failure. All that progress gone. He'd proven to himself once again that he couldn't stick to anything long-term. Sound familiar? This is where most people give up entirely. They think that falling off track proves they don't have what it takes to change. But Mike was about to learn one of the most important lessons in Stoic philosophy. How you handle setbacks determines whether you're building resilience or just building habits. Marcus Aurelius, who faced plagues, wars, and personal tragedies while trying to live according to Stoic principles, wrote something in his journal that would have saved Mike weeks of self-criticism. When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. But I have seen the beauty of good and the ugliness of evil, and have recognized that the wrongdoer has a nature related to my own. Wait, that's not the right quote. Let me share the one that actually applies here. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Actually, the quote Mike needed was this one: confine yourself to the present. Marcus Aurelius understood that beating yourself up about past failures or worrying about future setbacks is just another form of wasting energy on things you can't control. Here's what Marcus Aurelius knew that Mike didn't. Falling off track isn't a sign of failure. It's a sign that you're human. The Stoics didn't expect perfection from themselves or anyone else. They expected progress, and progress isn't a straight line. Think about learning to walk as a child. You didn't fall down once and think, well, I guess walking isn't for me. You got back up and tried again. You fell down hundreds of times, and each time you learned something that made you better at walking. Eventually, walking became so natural you don't even think about it. The same principle applies to building any new pattern in your life. The setbacks aren't bugs in the system, they're features. They're opportunities to practice the most important skill of all, the ability to begin again. Mike's breakthrough came when he stopped seeing his week of missed workouts as evidence that he was weak-willed and started seeing it as valuable data. What had he learned? That his routine was too rigid to survive real-world chaos. That he needed backup plans for when life got complicated. That perfection wasn't the goal, consistency over time was the goal. Instead of trying to jump back into his full routine immediately, Mike applied what the Stoics called the discipline of action. He focused on one small step, just putting on his workout clothes each morning, even if he didn't have time to exercise. This tiny action kept the identity of person who works out alive even when the behavior wasn't possible. Within 2 weeks, Mike was back to his full routine, but now he had something more valuable than perfect habits. He had confidence in his ability to recover from setbacks. Here's how to apply this Stoic wisdom when you fall off track. First, skip the self-criticism entirely. It's not helpful and it wastes energy you need for getting back on course. Instead, get curious. What can you learn from this setback that will make you more resilient going forward? Second, start smaller than you think you need to. If you've been off your diet for a week, don't try to eat perfectly tomorrow. Just make one healthy choice. If you haven't exercised in a month, don't plan a 2-hour workout. Just put on your workout clothes. Third, remember that your identity isn't determined by your recent actions. It's determined by your consistent patterns over time. One bad week doesn't erase 6 weeks of progress any more than one good day creates lasting change. The Stoics understood that life is a practice, not a performance. You're not trying to achieve some perfect state and maintain it forever. You're developing the skill of returning to your values and priorities over and over again, no matter how many times you get knocked off course. Your Stoic transformation starts today. Remember Eric from the beginning of our journey? That Friday evening, when he felt completely stuck, staring out his Chicago apartment window, wondering if there was more to life? 6 months later, Eric's life looked completely different. Not because his circumstances magically changed, but because he applied these 10 Stoic principles we've explored together. Eric started small with just 5 minutes of morning reflection. He learned to see his anxiety as information rather than instruction. He built a simple routine that aligned with his values. He gave himself the command to stop settling for mediocrity. He freed up precious time by cutting out mindless distractions. He embraced challenges that scared him, like finally having honest conversations about his career goals. He surrounded himself with people who inspired growth rather than enabled complaints. He stopped fearing change and started seeing it as opportunity. He learned to say no to the inessential so he could say yes to what mattered. And when he inevitably fell off track, he practiced the art of beginning again with grace. Today, Eric runs his own consulting business, has deeper relationships, and wakes up each morning excited about the day ahead. Not because he became a different person, but because he became who he was always meant to be. Your transformation doesn't require dramatic life changes or perfect execution. It requires the courage to start where you are with what you have right now. The ancient Stoics gave us these tools not as abstract philosophy, but as practical wisdom for navigating the challenges of human existence. Which principle resonated most with you? What's the one small step you'll take today to begin your own reinvention? Share your commitment in the comments below. Your decision might inspire someone else to begin their journey. If this video helped you see new possibilities for your life, please hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear these ideas. And if you're ready to dive deeper into practical Stoicism for modern life, subscribe to Stoic Vivu and ring that notification bell. We're building a community of people committed to living with wisdom, courage, and purpose. Your new life is waiting. The question isn't whether you can change, it's whether you will. The Stoics are rooting for you, so are we.